Bloodline loyalty? That died tonight. Nobody saw this coming, not Solo, not Heyman, not even Roman. After Jacob Fatu snapped at Money in the Bank 2025, blindsiding Solo Sikoa mid-match, the fallout was instant. Cameras caught Solo storming backstage, eyes locked, fists clenched. He wanted answers, or maybe just revenge. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a declaration of war. And when Solo finally got in Jacob's face, let's just say, security couldn't hold it down for long. You won't believe what was said, and who stepped in. Full breakdown coming up. Nobody in the arena saw it coming. Not the crowd, who had been on their feet for 20 straight minutes watching Solo Sikoa fight tooth and nail for redemption. Not the commentators, who were seconds away from calling one of the most hard-fought wins in Bloodline history. And definitely not Solo himself. Bruised, bloodied, half-conscious, blinking up at the lights after Jacob Fatu dropped him cold in the middle of the ring. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a public execution. Jacob Fatu didn't hesitate. No theatrics. No warning. One moment, he was on the apron, silent, brooding, a wall of muscle and legacy. The next, he was leaping over the ropes, teeth clenched, eyes wild, driving his shoulder into Solo Sikoa's spine like a man possessed. And then came the Samoan spike. Not from Solo. From Jacob. The irony stung harder than the blow. This wasn't just a heel turn. This was a declaration of war. The kind that splits families, breaks legacies, and leaves scars far beyond the squared circle. And as the cameras followed Solo storming backstage, chest heaving, eyes blazing, fists clenched so tight his knuckles had turned white, you could feel it. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Money in the Bank 2025 was supposed to be Solo's night. Roman Reigns was absent, recovering, recharging, or maybe just watching. Paul Heyman was ringside, hands trembling, clutching his trademark phone like a man who knew something was about to go wrong but couldn't stop it. And Solo? He was walking into the ring with a look in his eyes that screamed unfinished business. He wasn't just fighting to win. He was fighting to prove he could lead. To the fans, to the locker room, to the Samoan family dynasty that had both carried and cursed him since the day he stepped through those ropes. And up until the final 90 seconds, it looked like he might do it. The crowd was with him. The momentum was his. Every move had meaning, every suplex, every Samoan drop, every punch delivered with purpose. But legacy isn't just about victory. It's about who stands with you when it matters most. And for Solo Sikoa, when it mattered most, Jacob Fatu stepped forward and stabbed him in the back. The reaction was instant. A tidal wave of disbelief rolled across the arena. Fans covered their mouths. Phones shot into the air. The commentary team was dead silent, until Michael Cole, voice cracking, whispered, "What the hell did we just see?" Even Paul Heyman didn't move. For the first time in years, the wise man was without words. He looked at Jacob like he didn't recognize him. As if the man standing in front of him, looming over Solo's motionless body, wasn't the same Bloodline warrior who swore allegiance just weeks earlier. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a fracture. A violent, irreversible split in the Bloodline hierarchy. And it cut deep. This wasn't a storyline twist. It wasn't a heel turn engineered for a cheap pop. It was a generational rupture, soaked in family history and personal ambition. It was Shakespearean in scope. A warrior who rose from the shadows to challenge the king's heir, not with words, but with steel-toed boots and a Samoan spike. The crowd didn't boo. They gasped. And that silence said more than any chant ever could. Seconds later, WWE cameras scrambled to follow Solo as he stumbled up the ramp, fury in every step. Blood on his lip. Rage in his eyes. Trainers tried to slow him down, he swatted them away like flies. One production assistant reached for his arm. Solo shoved him into a stack of crates so hard, the crash echoed like a gunshot. Security was already moving. Heyman trailing behind, lips moving, praying he could diffuse the storm before it ignited something worse. But Solo wasn't hearing it. This wasn't about cameras or kayfabe or crowd control. This was about blood. Real blood. And when blood betrays you, on that stage, in front of millions, you don't ask questions. You go find answers. Or you take revenge. For years, fans asked, what happens to the bloodline without Roman Reigns? Last night, we got the answer. They implode. Without Roman's control, without his leadership, without his psychological grip, the bloodline isn't a faction. It's a time bomb. A volatile mix of pride, resentment, and raw physical power, all barely held together by Paul Heyman's political strings and shared family history. And last night, one of those strings snapped. Jacob Fatu, the silent beast in the background, chose violence. Not because he wanted to destroy the bloodline, but because he wanted to rewrite it. And now, the question isn't why did he do it? It's who's next. Jacob Fatu and Solo Sikoa are not just wrestlers. They're descendants of one of wrestling's most dominant dynasties. They were taught the same moves, raised in the same rituals, shaped by the same expectations. But on that night, under the MITB spotlight, their paths violently diverged. One believed he was earning his right to lead. The other believed it was time to take that right, by force, if necessary. Bloodline loyalty? It died tonight. And something far more dangerous was born in its place. It started as dominance. It ended in betrayal. The bloodline wasn't just a wrestling faction. It was an empire. It was fear wrapped in tradition, draped in gold, and soaked in family honor. Built brick by brick with Roman Reigns at the helm, it didn't rise quietly. It exploded into the WWE universe with purpose. Ruthless. Calculated. Inevitable. From the moment Roman crowned himself the tribal chief in 2020, the foundation was set. He was no longer chasing championships. He was laying claim to a legacy bigger than titles. One that stretched across decades of Samoan wrestling greatness, from the Wild Samoans to Yokozuna to The Rock. But a legacy is only as strong as its loyalty. And over time, loyalty became the bloodline's greatest illusion. In the early years, fans watched Jey Uso break under the pressure of brotherhood. They saw Jimmy Uso rebel and then fall in line. The twin dynamic made it compelling, but it was always Roman's reign that held the pieces together. His presence was law. His silence was threat. His orders were absolute. Then came Solo Sikoa. Quiet. Intense. Brutal. He entered not with fanfare, but with purpose. A cold enforcer. A shadow. A question mark with a scowl. WWE booked him as the silent solution to every threat the bloodline faced. He didn't speak. He finished people. His debut at Clash at the Castle sent shockwaves, not just because he interfered in Drew McIntyre's biggest moment, but because he did it so decisively. Solo was the muscle. But muscles get tired. Muscles tear. Years passed. Roman's grip loosened. Not outwardly, not in the public eye, but behind the scenes, cracks were showing. Jimmy and Jay's tension reached a boiling point. Civil war within the bloodline tore headlines across WWE screens. Roman's defenses became erratic. Matches less frequent. Appearances more spaced out. But Solo stayed. Loyal. Deadly. Emotionless. Or so it seemed. Because loyalty in the bloodline never meant trust. It meant obedience. It meant knowing your place and staying in it. And eventually, Solo started looking less like an enforcer and more like a man waiting for something to shift. He watched the family burn from the inside and didn't flinch. Until Roman was gone. When Roman stepped away, part injury, part wear, part myth, the bloodline didn't vanish. It simply reshuffled. Solo moved forward. Paul Heyman stayed close, nervously clutching power like sand slipping through fingers. And then came Jacob Fatu. The wild card. The quiet cousin. The ghost in the family tree. For months, fans speculated when Jacob would arrive. His name whispered in dirt sheets. His face seen at ringside. His signature powerbombs watched on YouTube compilations from his time in MLW. Everyone knew what he was capable of. But no one knew where he fit. Was he a replacement for Roman? A rival to Solo? A backup plan for Heyman? His first few appearances offered no clues. Silent nods. Minimal words. Explosive moves in six-man tag matches. But no promos. No allegiances declared. He walked like a soldier, but never saluted. And that's what made him dangerous. What no one talked about, at least not out loud, was the elephant in the locker room. Bloodline loyalty was never natural. It was conditioned. It was demanded. The moment Roman declared himself tribal chief, he turned family ties into battle lines. You were either with him or against him. No in between. Jacob Fatu didn't grow under Roman's command. He wasn't battle-tested in the Bloodline wars. He wasn't one of the ones who bent the knee. He walked in his family, yes. But not forged in the same fire. And he saw things differently. He saw cracks. Weakness. Maybe even hypocrisy. Solo had clawed his way up through silent service. Jacob wasn't about to do the same. In truth, loyalty in the Bloodline was already breaking long before Money in the Bank 2025. It broke when Jey Uso walked away. It cracked deeper when Jimmy betrayed his own twin. And when Roman began disappearing, piece by piece, the Bloodline didn't adapt. It stalled. Heyman filled the silence with strategy. Solo filled the void with violence. But neither man could bring back the sense of fear and direction Roman inspired. And into that vacuum stepped Jacob. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. He just waited. Loyalty turned into leverage. And everyone started watching everyone. Heyman watching Solo. Solo watching Jacob. Jacob watching everything. Because loyalty wasn't family anymore. It was currency. And Jacob Fatu was ready to cash in. What he did at Money in the Bank wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't heat of the moment. It was precise. Calculated. The kind of move someone makes when they've already accepted that they'll never be seen as second in command. Only as the one who takes command. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was philosophical. Jacob didn't just attack Solo's body. He attacked the unspoken code the Bloodline had lived by for 5 years. You don't betray blood. You don't challenge the order. You don't act without the family's blessing. But Jacob Fatu never asked permission. He acted. And the moment he struck, he didn't just leave Solo lying. He burned the family banner. For years, WWE painted the Bloodline as this mythic empire of unity and power. But under that armor was something more volatile. Ego. Jealousy. Desperation. Jacob Fatu knew that. And he knew where to hit it hardest. The moment he did, everything that once held that faction together crumbled. Because legacy can only take you so far. Eventually, someone comes along who stops caring about the legacy. Someone who stops playing the role. And that's what made Jacob Fatu so dangerous. He didn't want to preserve the Bloodline. He wanted to replace it. And in that one attack, one spear, one spike, one look of disdain, he made his intentions brutally clear. Now the past is gone. Loyalty is dead. And the war for what comes next has already begun. Everything about this match was personal. Even when no one said a word. Money in the Bank 2025 had been a night of shocks from the start. Surprise cash-ins. Alliances formed and broken in a single night. But as the main event crept closer, the energy shifted. The arena didn't just get louder. It got tenser. You could feel it, the kind of anticipation that only comes when something historic is about to happen, even if you can't quite say what. Solo Sikoa was set to face Drew McIntyre in what WWE had billed as a defining match. Not for a title. Not for a trophy. But for status. For placement in the hierarchy of the company, the family, and the future. And maybe that was the mistake. Maybe calling this match a defining moment sent the wrong message to someone else in the locker room. Someone who thought his moment was being stolen. Let's break it down from the top. When Solo Sikoa's music hit, it wasn't just another entrance. It was a war drum. No pyro. No flare. Just Solo. Shoulders squared, head lowered, dragging a tension behind him that stretched all the way from Roman's last title defense to tonight's main event. Behind him was Paul Heyman, pacing, sweating, fidgeting with his tie like it was cutting off circulation. A step behind Heyman stood Jacob Fatu, arms crossed, a hood over his head, and a face that read like stone. From the moment they stepped through the curtain, Jacob didn't say a word. Neither did Solo. But eyes? They spoke volumes. And if you were paying attention, you'd have noticed it, Solo didn't look at Jacob once. The silent kind of avoidance that only happens when two people already know something's off, but neither wants to be the first to admit it. Drew McIntyre, on the other hand, stormed in like a Scottish juggernaut. His entrance was thunder and sword and fire. He wasn't here to play family games. He was here to fight. And from bell to bell, that's exactly what he did. The bell rang and they didn't circle each other. They collided. Hard. Solo lunged. Drew countered. They locked up with a snap that echoed like a gunshot. Power met power, but McIntyre had the advantage in reach and momentum. He used it early, backing Solo into the corner with a series of stiff forearms before unleashing a thunderous overhead belly-to-belly suplex. Solo popped up like a man possessed. There was no pause between spots. Every move was tight, deliberate, and heavy. They weren't just performing. They were punishing each other. Drew tried to keep the pace high, running lariats, big boots, and a rope-assisted neckbreaker that got the first near fall. Solo played the long game. He absorbed the hits. Waited for Drew to get reckless. And when he did, Solo made him pay. At minute 9, Drew missed a corner splash. Solo capitalized with a Samoan drop that shook the ring. Then came a running hip attack that crushed McIntyre in the corner. Heyman yelled something from ringside, something sharp, urgent. You couldn't hear it over the crowd, but Solo nodded once. It looked like they were in sync. For now. The middle part of the match slowed, but the tension didn't drop. Solo controlled the ring, cutting Drew down with methodical offense, elbow drops, stomps, and a textbook rear chin lock that looked more like a neck crank. And through it all, Jacob Fatu stood ringside, unmoving. Watching. He didn't shout advice. He didn't pound the apron. He didn't even react when Solo dropped McIntyre with a runnage onto the steel steps. He was silent. Like he was scouting. Measuring. The shift happened around minute 14. Drew rallied. Out of nowhere, he hit a Glasgow kiss that staggered Solo. Followed it with a spinebuster and a kip-up that sent the crowd into a frenzy. The energy flipped like a switch. Solo stumbled. McIntyre stalked. And then came the countdown. 3, 2, 1. Claymore, missed. Solo ducked. Rolled out. Smart. But instead of regrouping with Heyman, he turned to Jacob. And Jacob stepped back. Just one step. Small. Subtle. But it told a story. Solo looked at him. Just for a second. Confused. And in that second, Drew launched over the top rope with a tope con hilo that took them both out. Heyman screamed. Jacob didn't move. Something had cracked. By minute 18, they were both bleeding. Drew had a cut above the eye. Solo's mouth was busted open. Every strike sounded wetter, heavier. The crowd was roaring. The near falls were getting tighter. Claymore, kick out at 2.9. Samoan spike, blocked. Spinebuster, countered into a guillotine. Every sequence felt like it could be the end. And then, Solo hit the spinning solo. Covered. 1. 2. Kick out. He went to the corner. Loaded up the spike again. Heyman screamed, "Now! Now!" And Solo charged. And Jacob Fatu slid into the ring. No one expected it. Not Drew. Not Solo. Not even Heyman. And certainly not the fans, whose gasps turned the arena ice cold. Jacob didn't even hesitate. He leveled Solo with a spear that folded him in half. The kind of spear that didn't look like it was designed for TV. It looked like it was meant to hurt. Heyman's face turned white. Solo lay motionless. Drew McIntyre didn't even understand what was happening at first. He just stared, mouth open, too stunned to capitalize. Jacob looked down at Solo, then looked at Heyman. No words. He backed up. And for good measure, he dropped a Samoan spike of his own, right into Solo's throat. Solo's signature move. Delivered by the man who was supposed to have his back. The betrayal was complete. Drew covered. 1. 2. 3. The bell rang. But no one celebrated. Not Drew. Not the crowd. Not even Jacob. Because this wasn't the end of a match. It was the start of something much, much worse. McIntyre rolled out of the ring, almost in disbelief. The referee tried to raise his hand. He shook it off. This wasn't his story. The camera cut to Heyman, who had collapsed to his knees at ringside, whispering "Oh my God" over and over like a prayer. And Jacob? He just walked up the ramp. Slowly. Unbothered. No emotion. Not a glance back. Solo was still in the ring. Broken. Beaten. Betrayed. The crowd didn't chant. They didn't cheer. They watched. Watched as the man who had given everything to the Bloodline lay abandoned by it. And somewhere backstage, someone was already rolling. Because what happened next, the fury, the confrontation, the explosion, would need its own chapter. This match was meant to define a leader. Instead, it revealed a usurper. And now, the family wasn't a faction. It was a battlefield. There are moments in WWE history when the action after the match becomes more iconic than anything that happened inside the ring. This was one of them. The second the bell rang and Jacob Fatu disappeared up the ramp, Solo Sikoa began to stir. Not the kind of slow, dramatic rise a wrestler does for crowd sympathy. This was different. This was animalistic. He didn't roll over, he pushed up, like he was trying to lift the weight of the betrayal off his chest. His face wasn't pain. It was fury. The kind of fury that builds in your stomach when your own blood makes you look like a fool in front of the entire world. Trainers tried to help him. He shoved one of them so hard he went flying out of frame. Another put a hand on Solo's shoulder. He didn't even look, he just swung back and nearly dropped the guy with a wild elbow. Solo didn't want help. He wanted answers. And he was going to get them, even if he had to rip through the entire backstage area to do it. WWE cameras caught him as he rolled out of the ring and stormed past the timekeeper's area. He ignored the ref, bypassed Drew McIntyre still trying to wrap his head around what happened, and brushed off Paul Heyman's desperate cries. Solo. Solo, wait. Let's talk. Just give me a minute. Solo didn't wait. He didn't look back. He didn't even look at the curtain as he shoved it aside and charged through Gorilla. This wasn't a wrestler doing a promo. This was a man whose identity had just been ripped away. The gorilla position, normally controlled chaos, fell silent as Solo stomped through. Producers stepped back. Stagehands froze. One camera operator caught his shoulder and swung left just in time to see Solo knock over a lighting rig with a vicious backhand. Heyman chased after him. You could hear his voice trembling. Don't do anything stupid. Solo, he's family. Let's think, just think. Solo didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His face was screaming it, that wasn't family. That was war. Once Solo hit the hallways, it became clear, this wasn't going to end with a shouting match. He wasn't looking to talk. He was hunting. The camera followed as he moved past catering, knocking over tables, flipping metal chairs out of his way like they were plastic. He screamed once, an unfiltered, guttural roar that echoed off the cinderblock walls and made every bystander duck for cover. Backstage talent began scattering. Shotzi leaned out of the makeup room, caught a glimpse of Solo's face, and immediately stepped back inside, pulling the door shut. Two NXT call-ups tried to move equipment out of the hallway. Solo shouldered through them like they weren't even there. Security was finally on the move. 3 guards rushed around the corner, trying to form a wall in front of him. Big mistake. Solo charged straight through. Not around. Through. The first guard went down hard. The second got shoved so violently into the wall that the mounted signage cracked. The third tried to grab Solo's arm, and got hip-tossed clean onto a catering cart. It wasn't just adrenaline. It was rage. Pure, focused, surgical rage. And the only thing that mattered was finding Jacob Fatu. Somewhere behind the chaos, Paul Heyman caught up, barely. His tie was undone. Sweat poured down his forehead. He looked 10 years older than he did an hour earlier. He called out again, this time quieter. More desperate. Solo, please. Listen to me. Solo stopped. Briefly. Turned halfway. Just enough to acknowledge the voice. And then came the line that dropped the room, you knew, didn't you? Heyman froze. No, Solo. I swear on everything, but Solo didn't wait for the rest. He stared at Heyman for one more beat, eyes full of betrayal, and then turned back down the hallway. It wasn't just Jacob he was furious at anymore. It was the entire machine. Backstage producers scrambled to reroute traffic. The women's roster was redirected toward the opposite tunnel. A segment scheduled to shoot in the loading dock was postponed. The Bloodline's influence had always been big, but this? This was disruption. One camera cut to Damian Priest, standing near a vending machine. He watched the chaos unfold, shook his head, and muttered under his breath, damn. That wasn't part of the plan. Liv Morgan was seen ushering new signees into a different hallway, telling them to stay clear. Just trust me, she said, glancing over her shoulder. You don't want to be near that guy right now. Everyone knew. Everyone felt it. Solo wasn't going to calm down. Not until he saw Jacob. And if that happened, there wouldn't be a camera in the world fast enough to catch what followed. The camera crew struggled to keep up as Solo picked up speed. Every turn, every hallway, every door thrown open with force, it felt like he was following an invisible trail. Then he reached catering. Empty. Jacob wasn't there. He growled in frustration and kicked over an entire table stacked with bottled water, sending them scattering across the floor. Then, a tech whispered something to Heyman. Heyman turned to Solo and shouted, "Parking lot." Someone said he went toward the trucks. That was all Solo needed. He pivoted on one foot and sprinted toward the loading dock. The camera followed, jerky, unbalanced, the footage suddenly raw and cinematic. Like a chase scene in a war documentary. And it was about to reach its boiling point. As Solo reached the final hallway before the lot, 2 more security guards positioned themselves in front of the heavy steel door. They didn't even try to talk. They just braced. Solo stopped. He stared at them. Not moving. Not breathing. Then, without warning, he screamed and charged. The screen shook. One guard got clotheslined into the doorframe. The other managed to grab Solo's leg but was dragged several feet before being shaken off like a rag doll. Solo slammed into the steel door with his shoulder, bounced off, and then kicked it clean open. And there, standing next to a black Escalade with the trunk half open, was Jacob Fatu. Calm. Still in his gear. Unbothered. He didn't look surprised. He looked ready. But what came next wasn't a promo. It wasn't a confrontation. It was an eruption. The parking lot behind the arena was dimly lit, scattered with half-unloaded production trucks, crates, and crew members frozen mid-task. It wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was a war zone waiting to ignite. And at the center of it, Jacob Fatu stood like he'd been waiting all night. He didn't flinch when Solo kicked open the steel door. He didn't square up or throw his fists. He just looked. Head high. Chest still. Jaw set like stone. Solo didn't walk out. He exploded through the door. No hesitation. No words. Just fury. The first punch came before the camera had time to focus. Solo charged, caught Jacob clean on the cheek with a right hand that echoed across the loading bay. Jacob staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, he returned fire with a haymaker of his own, rocking Solo back into a stack of road cases. And just like that, it wasn't a fight. It was a brawl. No referees. No rules. No bell. Just years of resentment and betrayal packed into fists, knees, and chaos. Solo drove Jacob into the side of a van with a double-leg takedown, fists flying. Jacob twisted out, shoved Solo face first into the windshield, cracking it on impact. Production assistants scrambled away. One tried to shout into a walkie-talkie. Another just stood there, staring, like he couldn't believe what he was watching. It didn't matter. These weren't performers anymore. These were two men who had grown up under the same name, the same legacy, the same unspoken expectations, and one of them had just tried to erase the other in front of the entire world. Solo screamed as he tackled Jacob again, lifting him off his feet and slamming him onto the concrete. "You think you can just walk in, take this from me?" He grabbed Jacob by the collar of his Bloodline shirt and drove another fist into his mouth. Jacob spat blood, grinned, and said it for the first time all night, "I didn't take anything." He shoved Solo off, rolled to his feet, and hit a super kick so sudden, Solo crumpled like a sack of bricks. It wasn't a wrestling move. It was personal. By now, 7 security guards had arrived. 2 production managers tried to pull the men apart. It didn't work. Jacob ripped a boom mic off its arm and swung it like a bat, missing Solo by inches but shattering a nearby camera lens. Solo tried to dive back in, tackled one of the guards by mistake, and ended up under a pile of bodies. It took 3 men to hold him down. 2 more had to wrestle Jacob back, pinning him against a metal guardrail. Everyone was shouting. The feed was full of glitchy camera shakes and overlapping radio chatter. But through it all, one voice cut through. Paul Heyman. He stood at the edge of the chaos, red-faced, breathless, eyes wide with something between terror and revelation. This wasn't just bad for business. This was total collapse. Solo finally broke through the pile, screaming as he lunged at Jacob. "You're dead to me. You hear me? You're dead." Jacob didn't look scared. He just stared back, calm. "You never mattered, Solo. You were a placeholder." That line hit like a gunshot. Solo stopped mid-charge. His fists clenched. Breathing hard. But something in his face broke, like the words cut deeper than any blow ever could. Heyman rushed in, waving his arms, standing between them. "Enough. Enough. This isn't how this ends. This can't be how this ends." Neither man moved. And then, from behind the camera, another voice entered the mix. A calm, low voice. One word, stop. The camera whipped around. Rikishi. Dressed in black. No expression on his face. Just presence. It was like time froze. Jacob looked stunned for the first time all night. Solo's face shifted, from rage to something else. Conflict. Confusion. Rikishi stepped between them and didn't say another word. Just stared at each son. Jacob lowered his arms. Solo backed away. And the screen faded to black. WWE didn't upload footage for 2 hours. The official Twitter account posted a black square with white text, "The family is fractured. There will be consequences." Fans were still screaming in comment sections, on TikTok, across Reddit threads. What just happened? Did WWE just detonate its biggest storyline in the middle of a parking lot? Was this real? Was Rikishi there as a storyline wrinkle, or a father trying to stop a blood war? No one had answers. But everyone agreed, this wasn't over. This was the beginning of the most personal feud WWE has seen in over a decade. Not just a fight for dominance. A fight for identity. For legacy. And for blood. The walls of a WWE locker room have seen it all, screaming matches, backstage blow-ups, broken friendships. But what happened after Money in the Bank 2025 didn't feel like drama. It felt like shock. No one moved. Not at first. Word spread through the halls like a rumor wrapped in disbelief. Wrestlers were still lacing their boots, removing tape, finishing post-match interviews when the ripple hit. Jacob turned on Solo. By the time producers confirmed it wasn't part of the script, not planned, not discussed, not even hinted at, reactions shifted from confusion to real concern. The Bloodline had always commanded respect. But now? Now, they were being talked about in hushed tones. Like a family no one wanted to cross or question. Because for the first time, no one knew where the line was anymore. Santos Escobar sat at his locker, staring at his phone, jaw locked. "Damn," he said to no one in particular. "That's not just a turn. That's a statement." Backstage cameras caught Io Sky walking past Dakota Kai and whispering something in Japanese. Dakota's eyes widened. Io just shook her head. Over in the trainer's area, Austin Theory was getting his knee iced. He looked at the screen and muttered, "Glad I wasn't booked with them tonight." Not fear. Not quite. But unease. There was a time when being connected to the Bloodline meant security, power, elevation. Now, it meant volatility. Anyone who thought they understood the structure of that faction was suddenly questioning everything. Locker room alliances started to fray almost immediately. You had veterans like The Miz, who chalked it up to strategy. "I've seen 100 heel turns," he said to a nearby crew member. But this? This is long-term storytelling, brother. You don't pull a move like that unless you want the top spot. But younger talent saw something different. Braun Breaker, leaning against a production case, was more direct. "You don't do family like that. Not in front of the world." Jacob lost a lot of respect tonight. Then there were the ones who weren't picking sides, just watching the storm. Kevin Owens, towel over his head, didn't even look up when asked for comment. "This doesn't involve me. And I'm gonna keep it that way." But not everyone had the luxury of neutrality. Jey Uso wasn't at MITB. That wasn't by accident. Insiders say WWE deliberately kept him off the card, knowing any appearance could complicate what was about to go down. But word leaked later that night, he was watching. Live. From a locker room in a different city. When Solo was laid out and Jacob stood over him, phones started lighting up with messages. "Where's Jay? What's he thinking?" No comment came. But others filled the gap. The Street Profits tweeted a cryptic eye emoji with the caption, "Family over everything, or is it?" Chad Gable posted a single line, told y'all this would happen. And in a since-deleted Instagram story, Nia Jax wrote, "You can't lead with fear and expect loyalty forever." It wasn't just the audience reacting. It was the talent. They weren't seeing this as a storyline. They were seeing it as a shift. Multiple sources backstage confirmed the writing team was blindsided. Not by the betrayal, Jacob's turn had been protected, planned by only 3 people, but by the sheer impact. One producer reportedly said, "This was supposed to be an angle. It turned into a nuclear event." Segments were rewritten in real time. Backstage interviews cancelled. Planned post-match segments featuring mid-card titles were bumped to next week. Why? Because no one wanted to follow that energy. It sucked the air out of the building. And in some ways, it rewrote the rules. A bloodline turn used to mean a new alliance. Now it meant violence. Raw, unpredictable, public violence. One wrong promo, one bad word, and someone might get put through a locker next week. After the brawl, Solo Sikoa didn't go to medical. Didn't ask for ice. Didn't say a word. He reportedly stayed in a dark corner of the arena, surrounded by 4 security guards, arms crossed, body vibrating with rage. When asked if he wanted to address the locker room or do an interview for WWE.com, he just stared at the producer until they left. He didn't need to talk. The entire arena had already heard what he had to say. And the locker room got the message, he wasn't just coming for Jacob. He was coming for anyone who didn't understand that betrayal comes with a price. While Solo fumed, Jacob was gone. Not just out of the building, gone. No one saw him leave. No car spotted. No interview taped. No statement made. The last image of Jacob Fatu was him disappearing into a shadow behind an Escalade. Silent. Unapologetic. Some say he took a private car to a hotel booked under an alias. Others claim he flew out within the hour, refusing to even speak to Paul Heyman. No one could confirm either. And that only deepened the mystery. Who was he with? Who approved this? And who, if anyone, is controlling him now? Of all the reactions backstage, none carried the weight, or the heartbreak, of Paul Heyman. The wise man looked like someone who'd seen a god fall. Disheveled. Pale. Voice shaking. He was overheard pacing near the production trucks, repeating one phrase under his breath, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know," but people weren't so sure. Because if anyone in WWE knew how to manipulate people, it was Paul Heyman. And some wondered. Was this the plan all along? Break the old bloodline. Build a new one. Use Solo's rage. Use Jacob's power. Tear down Roman's legacy to build something even more fearsome. Heyman didn't give interviews that night. Didn't speak publicly. But his silence said everything. He looked like a man realizing the monster he raised might now be hunting him too. The bloodline had always carried a myth around it, an unbreakable bond. But the myth is dead. And everyone backstage feels it. Locker room morale hasn't crumbled, but it's shaken. The shift is real. Rookies are nervous. Mid-carders are watching carefully. Main eventers are wondering who's really in charge. Not just of WWE. Of the story. Because if Jacob can do that to Solo. If Solo can explode like that on live TV. Then everything's on the table. Paul Heyman has always been more than a mouthpiece. More than a manager. More than a man holding a mic. In WWE, he's been a chess master, a dealmaker, a fire starter. He survived every era, every regime, every civil war because he plays the game better than anyone. He doesn't manage superstars, he weaponizes them. And for years, he stood at the heart of the bloodline like a conductor directing a symphony of chaos. But after Money in the Bank 2025, the conductor dropped his baton. And the symphony turned on itself. Heyman was ringside during Solo's match. Positioned exactly where he's always been, just a few feet outside the ropes, hands gripping his phone like it held nuclear codes. He didn't speak much that night. No signature introductions. No last-minute orders. Just eyes locked on Solo and Jacob. Watching. Waiting. Maybe worrying. Because Paul Heyman has one fatal flaw: he knows when things are going wrong long before anyone else. And when Jacob Fatu stood frozen at ringside during that match, when he didn't lift a finger to support Solo, Heyman knew. He didn't say it. He couldn't stop it. But he knew. So when Jacob hit that spear, when Solo's body folded and Heyman's mouth dropped open, not in shock, but in resignation, you could see it. He'd already lost control. And now the empire he helped build was burning in front of him. To understand Heyman's collapse, you have to understand his pride. Paul doesn't do alliances. He brokers influence. When he aligned with Roman Reigns in 2020, it wasn't to be a follower. It was to be the whisper in the tribal chief's ear. The strategist behind the curtain. The architect of dominance. And for 4 years, it worked. Roman ruled. The bloodline grew. Titles racked up. Enemies fell. And through it all, Paul stood tall, untouchable. Even when Jay and Jimmy rebelled, even when cracks began to show, Heyman held the narrative together. He made himself indispensable. But that kind of power only lasts if everyone believes in the myth. And now, the myth is dead. Because if Solo Sikoa, the one bloodline member who never questioned Paul, can erupt like that. If Jacob Fatu, the silent force meant to reinforce the foundation, can betray Solo while Paul watched. Then what's left? In the backstage chaos, Heyman chased after Solo like a man trying to catch lightning. Calling his name. Pleading. Swearing ignorance. But Solo didn't believe him. Not for a second. You knew, didn't you? Those 4 words pierced Heyman's entire legacy. And when Solo looked at him with that mixture of betrayal and disgust, something in Heyman shrank. He didn't shout back. He didn't get defensive. He looked scared. Not just of Solo's fists. But of what he'd become. A middleman with no leverage. A bridge between 2 giants who now wanted to tear each other apart. And Paul? He was caught in the middle, holding the rope as it frayed on both ends. Paul Heyman's history is littered with betrayals. Brock Lesnar. CM Punk. Big Show. Rob Van Dam. He's played both sides more times than most fans can count. But the bloodline was supposed to be different. It wasn't just business. It was family. It was legacy. He didn't just attach himself to power, he built it. He gave Roman the platform. Gave Solo the spotlight. Positioned Jacob as the heir to a deeper legacy. And now, it's crumbling. Because power based on fear eventually breeds resentment. And legacy based on manipulation eventually breeds mutiny. Heyman knew this. He just never thought he would be the one watching it unfold from the sidelines. Backstage, Heyman didn't return to the locker room. He wandered. According to sources, he spent nearly 30 minutes pacing between the makeup area and the private executive hallway, phone in hand, but making no calls. He just stared at the screen. Producers tried to ask if he wanted to do a post-show segment. He waved them off. A road agent approached to offer an escort out of the building. He refused. He wasn't ready to leave. Because Paul Heyman doesn't just exit a storyline. He rewrites it. Or he used to. Now? He doesn't know which page he's on. Later that night, 2 major superstars, whose names weren't disclosed, were seen speaking with Heyman in hushed tones. One source claims Seth Rollins was one of them. Another insists it was Cody Rhodes. No one knows what was said. But everyone saw the look in Paul's eyes. Not anger. Not strategy. Fear. Not just of what Jacob had done. But of what Solo might do next. And maybe most chilling, what Roman would do when he returns. He survived ECW going under. Survived being ousted from SmackDown. Survived being chewed up and spit out by the very superstars he helped build. But the Bloodline was supposed to be different. He poured years into it. Negotiated every arc, crafted every promo. Protected every secret. And now? The foundation cracked. The generals are turning on each other. And no one is turning to Paul Heyman for answers. Because the middleman can only survive when he's in the middle of something. Now he's stuck between a monster he didn't see coming. And a warrior he can no longer control. The arena still hadn't emptied when fans started asking the question. Not what just happened. Not is Solo okay? Not even why did Jacob do it? The real question, the one flooding social media, podcasts, group chats, was this: where is Roman Reigns? Because Roman wasn't just the tribal chief. He wasn't just the Bloodline's leader. He was the axis. The gravitational pull that kept all the chaos orbiting in perfect balance. And now that balance is gone. Solo Sikoa has been betrayed. Jacob Fatu has declared himself untethered. Paul Heyman looks like he aged 5 years in one night. And Roman? Silent. Unseen. Absent. But his presence, or lack of it, hangs over everything like thunder in the distance. Everyone's watching the horizon, waiting for the sky to split open. Waiting for the tribal chief to come back and restore order. Or wreck everything. The question isn't whether Roman will respond. The question is what kind of man he'll be when he does. Roman Reigns hasn't stepped into a WWE ring since WrestleMania 41. He left not in defeat, but in retreat. The wear and tear of years as the most dominant force in WWE took its toll. The Bloodline storyline was already fraying. Civil war had torn through his cousins. Jimmy and Jey Uso had publicly split. Heyman was scrambling to keep the train on the rails. And Roman? Roman disappeared. No injury report. No farewell promo. Just silence. At first, fans speculated, was this rest? Retirement? Strategy? But Paul Heyman insisted Roman would return. When it mattered. So when MITB 2025 exploded with betrayal, and Roman didn't appear, didn't send a message, didn't even acknowledge it online, the silence turned heavy. It didn't feel like strategy anymore. It felt like abandonment. But maybe that's the point. Roman Reigns' entire run as tribal chief wasn't about dominance in the ring, it was about dominance in mindset. He didn't just beat his opponents. He broke their spirits. He convinced his family to bend the knee, not just to a title reign, but to a way of life. Under Roman, the Bloodline operated like a syndicate. Controlled. Disciplined. Every move had a purpose. Every betrayal was calculated. Every return was staged for maximum drama. But the cost of that control was dependency. And now, without Roman there to manipulate the board, everyone is playing their own game. Solo isn't asking for permission anymore. Jacob never asked in the first place. Heyman's advice is falling on deaf ears. And the fans, who once hated Roman's tyranny, are now asking for it back. Because at least when Roman was in charge, chaos had rules. The Samoan dynasty isn't just a brand. It's a bloodline that's dominated wrestling for decades. From Alpha and Sikoa, to Yokozuna, to Rikishi, to The Rock, to Roman Reigns, it's a family name forged in power and protected by pain. Roman took that legacy and weaponized it. He turned family into force. Turned tribal chief into a role more feared than champion. But in doing so, he created a culture of fear and obedience, not unity. Jey Uso walked out because he couldn't breathe under Roman's rule. Jimmy tried to lead and got crushed in the process. Solo was molded into a silent weapon, but never truly embraced. And Jacob? Jacob was never brought in. Not early. Not even during the height of the Bloodline story. He was the ghost of the family, whispers from the independent scene, rumors from Paul Heyman, glances during family gatherings. He watched from a distance as Roman built a kingdom and never invited him inside. So when Jacob finally entered the gates, he didn't kneel. He took. It's been said in off-the-record interviews and quiet locker room whispers, Roman Reigns didn't fully trust Jacob Fatu. Not because of talent. Jacob had that in spades. Anyone who watched MLW or followed the family knew Jacob was a once-in-a-generation athlete. But Roman saw something in him. Maybe it was unpredictability. Maybe it was a refusal to follow. Maybe it was the simple fact that Jacob didn't need Roman's blessing to be great. And that was the problem. Because Roman built the bloodline around loyalty. Around structure. Around control. Jacob was uncontrollable. And Roman doesn't share thrones. Which is why, even now, some fans wonder if Roman's silence is part pride, part punishment. Like a king watching his subjects destroy themselves to prove how badly they needed him. But others think something darker is brewing. Because if Jacob declared war on Solo, and Solo's going scorched earth in response, then Roman's not coming back to restore order. He's coming back to reclaim the throne. Even if it means wiping out everyone left standing. What would Roman do? That question has haunted fans since MITB. Would Roman defend Solo? Would he punish Jacob? Would he see them both as failed lieutenants? Or would he rebuild the bloodline entirely, from ashes and betrayal? The Roman Reigns of 2021 would have walked down to the ring, microphone in hand, and shamed them both into submission. The Roman of 2023 might have let Solo do the dirty work, pulling strings from the shadows. But the Roman of 2025? He's been silent. And silence from Roman Reigns is never passive. It's tactical. Every absence has a purpose. Every return is a reckoning. Fan communities are split down the middle. Some are calling for Roman to return immediately. A surprise entrance. A beatdown. A thunderous, arena-shaking return to remind everyone who still rules. Others say he shouldn't return at all. That Solo versus Jacob is the evolution of the bloodline, something that needs to break entirely from Roman's control to become something new. Hashtag reclaim the throne is trending. So is hashtag burn the bloodline. This isn't just a storyline anymore. It's a referendum on everything Roman Reigns built. And everything he failed to protect. What comes next? There are whispers that Roman has already recorded something, a message, a vignette, maybe even a return segment. But no one can confirm it. Some insiders say he's waiting for SummerSlam. Others say he might show up unannounced, no music, no warning, just violence. There's a third theory, though. One that's less flashy but far more Roman, he's watching. Not to return. But to decide who's left standing, and then bury them both. Because if there's one thing Roman Reigns has always understood, it's that family means nothing if they don't follow your rule. And now that rule is broken.